Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. Here's what we're looking at. Residents call out the mayor as plans to move migrants to a former South Shore high school take shape. How businesses in Edgewater are faring amid construction on the Red Line.
Guns are being flooded into our community.
Freshman Congressman Jonathan Jackson on tackling gun violence and more.
First stop, the sewer pipe.
You don't want to miss this. The latest in our WTTW News Explained series, we explore the sewer system when we follow what happens after you flush.
And Paris, as you mentioned, I'm in Edgewater reporting live as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. The reconstruction of red and purple line tracks on the north side is opening up public space that's been closed off for 100 years. We'll find out what might fill that space and hear how local businesses have been faring during CTA construction and COVID. But first, back to you.
All right, Nick, we'll look forward to that. And now to our top story tonight. Residents are sounding off on the city's plan to move migrants to a former high school in the South Shore community. City officials are set to host a community meeting there tonight, but some residents are already calling on the mayor to stop the move. Reporter Joanna Hernandez is in South Shore ahead of the meeting. Joanna.
In Paris, that's right. Well, many residents here are not happy with the possibility of having this former high school used for a temporary shelter for migrants. Now, some residents have protested today, saying the community has been pushing to have this building become a communal space. We're told for the last couple of years, the building has been a training center for the police and fire departments. Residents told us about the building's well-kept conditions, including having an indoor pool, a space community members say they have been waiting to have full access to. Now, with the city's plans to use it as a migrant shelter, residents feel they are once again being ignored. Community members we spoke with were concerned about safety and lack of consideration from the city to use their neighborhood as a hub for asylum seekers. One of the things they emphasized is a lack of resources in the area. They talked about the need for employment opportunities, including safe spaces for youth.
Just look around our main streets, you will see the disinvestment. It is a slap in the face that we as citizens of the United States of America do not have the resources and support, but you're going to bring people who are not citizens here in our community, in our buildings that we pay taxes for, that you took away from us.
We already felt as though when the projects were torn down, they sent most of the people into our area, creating more and more crime in this area. And now they do this to us.
We have watched our communities disinvested for decades with no one caring. Now we have a situation, a humanitarian situation here in Chicago, and now the state, federal, and local governments all of a sudden have money to spend. When we're asking for it for decades, we get ignored. Now all of a sudden, here are all the resources.
The city is holding a community meeting tonight to hear from residents. City officials, meanwhile, continue to find temporary housing for the hundreds of asylum seekers once again arriving in the city. A crisis residents here say they empathize with but can't accept in their community. Now, this similar message was shared in Woodlawn when residents criticized the mayor for also transforming a former school into a migrant shelter. Now, Paris, you can feel the tension and frustration here from these residents. The main question here is why? Why here? This is one of many questions that will be asked at tonight's community meeting. It's going to be held right across from this building at the new school. We're told Mayor Lightfoot will be joined with Alderperson Michelle Harris and other city officials. I also have to mention we have seen people with signs saying welcome migrants, so this should be an interesting conversation. Reporting live from South Shore, I'm Joanna Hernandez. I send it back to you, Paris.
Joanna, thanks. No doubt it will be an interesting conversation, and I do think the incoming mayor, Brandon Johnson, has taken a different tack, so we'll see how that plays out as he gets inaugurated in just over 10 days. And now to some more of today's top stories. A faith leader convicted of sexually abusing a student and an employee still lives within feet of the school. That's according to a new investigation by WTTW News. In 2016, faith leader Mohammed Salim pled guilty in 2 separate cases of sexual abuse at the Institute of Islamic Education in suburban Elgin. A judge allowed him to stay at his residence next to the school that educated and employed his victims, even though it's illegal for a child sex offender to reside within 500 feet of a school or playground in Illinois. You can read that full investigation on our website. A fire breaks out at a high-rise in South Shore this morning. The Chicago Fire Department says the fire was on the 10th floor of that building. Crews extinguished the fire and conducted a search. No injuries have so far been reported. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. 4 members of a far-right extremist group are convicted for their role in the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio was among the convicted. The group members are found guilty of seditious conspiracy for plotting to attack the U.S. Capitol and to keep Donald Trump in power following his loss in the 2020 presidential election. The charge carries a prison sentence of up to 20 years. Rideshare drivers protest what they are calling dangerous and unfair working conditions.
There is a safety crisis at Uber, and people of color are bearing the brunt.
Drivers are calling for safer working conditions, better wages, and a fair and transparent deactivation process. Joining them were Alderman Mike Rodriguez and Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez, who are working to pass a rideshare living wage and safety ordinance in City Council. In a statement, Uber says, quote, the City of Chicago's own study released last week shows that all full-time drivers make more than $20 an hour after expenses, and a quarter of drivers make more than $29 an hour after expenses. And up next, 2 years to go, what is left for the Red Line construction? We're live in Chicago's Edgewater community right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Construction often means disruption. That's certainly been true in Edgewater and Uptown, as the CTA has been working to rebuild century-old tracks and stations as part of its Red and Purple Line modernization project. And with that project kicking off just as COVID-19 hit, the challenges have been felt even more acutely. As part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series, producer Blair Paddock and reporter Nick Blumberg have been covering this issue from Edgewater, and now Nick joins us live from that neighborhood.
Well, Paris, we're here in front of the temporary Bryn Mawr station on the Red Line, plus a staging ground for a lot of the construction equipment and materials that CTA crews are using. Now, 2 of the 4 stations along this stretch are entirely shut down. This temporary station for southbound passengers is actually around the corner from where it's usually located. All those disruptions mean big changes in foot traffic that businesses in this community are used to.
If we were going to do a brick and mortar, we want to do something that would impact our community.
That's why a year ago this week, Mark Towns and his partner signed a lease to open Edgewater Candles on Bryn Mawr. Living nearby, they knew about the struggles businesses on Bryn Mawr have been facing over the last 3 years.
Opening up in this gorgeous building on this cute little corner with all this light, I think was only possible because of the opportunities presented, because of all the vacancies.
The store sells candles, incense, Edgewater-themed swag, and hosts candle-making classes. Towns says community members are supporting the business and sees that as the key to keeping Bryn Mawr vibrant.
It's great if your neighborhood has a bunch of little cute things. It's important for the people that live in the neighborhood to shop in their neighborhood.
Towns says he knows of a couple other storefronts on Bryn Mawr that will soon be vacant. The street has had a challenging 3 years between the Red and Purple Line construction and the COVID pandemic, but the Edgewater Chamber of Commerce's Christina Fitzinger says business owners have stayed nimble.
They're constantly changing menus, changing options, looking for ways to attract new people and bring people back who maybe don't dine in as often as they used to.
Fitzinger expects to see a couple new businesses crop up soon. Despite the upheaval of the construction, she credits the CTA with clear communication about what to expect and assistance promoting local businesses.
You can now actually see those tracks starting to come to fruition. You can kind of feel that excitement on that side of the street, really, bringing people back out, I hope, over the next couple of years.
Maria Sigmund's a third-generation business owner on Bryn Mawr and has seen plenty of ups and downs. She opened Salon Echo in 2005.
We were doing really well, growing. We had a really busy salon. 2008 came. And I had to think on my feet.
Sigmund's salon held on through that recession and more recently through COVID and redline reconstruction. She says the community makes the challenges worthwhile.
The diversity of the neighborhood, the other business owners, the community itself. It's very inviting, very welcoming.
With work on the northbound train tracks set to wrap up soon and new stations on the way, Sigmund's hopeful the new phase
Brings more businesses back to the neighborhood. We just don't get that same amount of foot traffic that we have. I'm excited about the prospect of the pedway.
That pedway Sigmund's referring to is about a mile of soon-to-be-open public space under the train tracks that's been blocked off for the last century or so by the solid embankment walls of the L that are there right now. Now, coming up, we'll find out what might take over that space once it's opened up, and we'll get the latest on where things stand with the train overhaul and where the project is headed. But first, Paris, back to you.
Massive project with lots of ramifications. Nick, thanks very much. And up next, one-on-one with freshman Congressman Jonathan Jackson. A debt ceiling standoff could push the federal government into default. That's just one of the big issues facing Congress, including freshman Congressman Jonathan Jackson, who succeeded longtime Representative Bobby Rush in Illinois' 1st Congressional District. And joining us now to tell us how he's adjusting to his new role is Congressman Jonathan Jackson. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. So top of the agenda right now, a tentative June 1st deadline where the U.S. could default on its debt if Congress does not agree to raise the debt ceiling. House Republicans, led by Speaker McCarthy, has said no go unless they get big spending cuts. How do you think this is all going to be resolved?
Well, it's gone on too long and too far. This car is running on fumes. You can see the check engine light and the yellow. That how is it going to resolve itself? It's really up to Speaker McCarthy. When we talk about the debt ceiling, debt limit, these are the bills the United States government generated in 2022. They're due today, so there's nothing to negotiate on paying past bills. Now, if they want to have a discussion about where should the economy go in the future, what should be the priorities on spending, that's a separate budget. But paying the bills that have already been incurred does not make any sense.
To your understanding, what does the Speaker want to get to an agreement?
He's not made that clear. He simply said 20% cuts across the board. I think the name of their program is Grow, Field, Build, Safe or something. It's really a deficit default on America provision. We've gone from a contract on America and one generation now to default on America. The debt ceiling and these risk-free securities, there's nothing to negotiate. This started in 1944 with the Brentwood Exchange up in New Hampshire when America had 75% of the world's reserve currency. 44 countries got together and said, let us make the United States the reserve currency. That is an extreme privilege and honor to have. Our securities are viewed as risk-free. Now we're under 50% of the reserve currencies around the world, and we're only 4% of the world's population. Now we see the wealth of South Africa, of Brazil, of Russia, of China, India. Other currencies are emerging, and it's our gift that they give us this privilege to have it. Now, when we default and the blood is already in the water, look at the Treasury markets that priced this in August. They're already showing a risk-adjusted premium. The market is already factoring in that when we go to auction now to buy U.S. Treasuries in August, it's already being reflected.
So the point here is this is going to have ramifications on the global economy if the U.S. does indeed default. I guess a parlor game is guessing which perhaps moderate Republicans that President Biden could pick off to perhaps get just a clean debt ceiling vote. Are there any?
Well, I wish that several of our colleagues would know. I wish I could have the same conversation in D.C. I taught business. I went to business school. I can tell you about the debt ceiling, I can tell you quite a few people in Congress don't know what it is. They're voting along party line which is even more scary. I would tell you the first 100 days in the Congress, some days it seems like it's Disneyland, it's a true pleasure, cherry blossom trees, all the other good things that are exciting. Other days it feels like a very competitive university, and on the worst day it feels like you've transferred to a bad high school. So we are now transferred into a bad high school where people aren't reading the books, don't know what the debt ceiling is, don't know what Bretton Woods was, don't know what a privilege it is, and you don't play with the debt ceiling.
So the idea I get here is the folks in Congress have about as good idea as we do in the public and how this is going to be resolved at this point. So, and there's not much time left, so we'll have to keep watching this. Another issue, you just saw folks in South Shore upset about migrants being housed there. In a week, Title 42 is going to end, which could mean lots more migrants coming to the border, trying to cross the border. How should the federal government attack this? And do you anticipate a big surge toward the border?
Well, the surge is here. The surge has never stopped. What is bringing people across the border? Safety and security opportunity. So to the degree that we took an exit off of the world stage and not invested in the South and Central and Central American countries, the people are in desperation. When someone decides to leave with their baby in their arm, with the shirt on their back, going into a climate that's cold, that doesn't speak the language, that's desperation. People do not necessarily want to come here. They're being driven away from their home country. So we have to have an initiative to help bring stability in their region, help grant them safety and security. I think that America is big enough, we can be compassionate enough to bring people in, but it also has to be under a fair policy. One of the things I'm going to propose in the Congress is a Restoration Act. Those Americans that already served their time deserve to be put back on the voting rolls. We can't have 4.7 million Americans off of the voting roll that's already served their time. I want to see a path for immigrants to come in and find a pathway to citizenship, and I want to see American citizens that have done their service, their time to America, that might have had a run-in with the judiciary, have their voting rights restored.
Are you talking about ex-felons getting their voting
Correct.
rights restored?
Absolutely. To me, it's the same coin, that in South Shore, this building has been left isolated and vacant. The community has been asking for services in it, and all of a sudden they couldn't find any money. Now they can find money for other residents. So it's unfair, but I do believe in compassion. We can house Americans. On the good news, I am so impressed with the government of Poland and the Polish community. When you saw the Ukrainian crisis begin, millions, 2 or 3 million is estimated, of Ukrainians fled into Poland. Poland didn't have this issue. They took the Ukrainian people into their homes, they took them into their schools, they took them into their hospitals. I mean, they didn't miss a beat. It's probably one of the most remarkable human crisis-caring stories that's never been fully communicated.
So you're saying that there's room for more compassion here in Chicago and the United States. I got to ask you about guns, because that's what you talked about at the top of the show. Republican majority in the House. Is there any gun legislation that would get bipartisan agreement?
I don't see it on the horizon, which is probably the most frustrating part of the time in the Congress. I've made friends with certain Republicans, and when I asked them about this specific part of where can we get some middle ground on gun legislation, I don't even want to repeat some of the things that have been said to me, but there's a generation of young activists that have come to Washington to make a difference on this issue. Think about it. Our children have gone from a fire drill to gun drills. This is traumatizing a generation. The young men that were kicked out of the state legislature in Tennessee, they were fighting to stop AR-15 automatic gun weapons. This gun is not used for hunting. This is a gun of war. It should be off the streets. This gun is more powerful than what policemen have. Do we need citizens more armed than the police? I think not. When I say it's a bad day in Capitol Hill, when you have members of Congress going on the floor passing out AR-15 lapel pins, when you have members of Congress going into the Natural Resource Committee asking if they can bring their guns, that's insanity.
So that, you've actually seen that. Wow, that's very interesting. Members asking to bring their guns to the Capitol. Congressman Jackson, so many issues to get to. We'll have to pick up at a future date to get to the other issues. Thanks for joining us.
Always enjoy you.
All right, take care. And up next, we check back with Nick Blumberg, who's reporting live tonight in Edgewater. But first, we take a look at the weather. Now we go back to Nick Blumberg, who is reporting from Edgewater as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Nick.
Well, Paris, as we mentioned earlier, the CTA is in the midst of a major and much needed overhaul of century-old tracks and stations for the red and purple line on the north side. I caught up with the CTA's Tammy Chase, and I began by asking her where things stand with this years-long modernization effort.
So we're about midway through rebuilding more than a mile of track structure between Lawrence and Bryn Mawr. That includes rebuilding purple and red line tracks that are in that area. And we're also getting to start building 4 new red line stations: Lawrence, Argyle, Berwyn, and Bryn Mawr.
So people who pass by the construction sites can see the columns supporting the tracks are a much different profile than what we're used to. That's actually going to create space underneath the tracks, is my understanding. What's the CTA planning to do with that space?
So over the roadways, there will be no columns in the street. So that's great for pedestrians, for sight lines, and it's great for drivers. But underneath, off the streets and underneath the tracks, there's going to be this brand new space that hasn't existed for 100 years since this railroad was built. And so that could be a lot of different things. We'll ask the community what they want block by block. And it may be parking, it may be space for community markets and so forth. So we're excited. We're excited to be able to offer this. In what city can you just have brand new space to offer people who live there?
And where do things stand in terms of rebuilding the 2 sides of the tracks?
Yeah, we are building this project in 2 stages. The first stage was building the northbound red and purple line tracks between Lawrence and Bryn Mawr. We're almost done with that. That's the exciting part. Once we complete that later this summer, we will put the new tracks into service, which means our customers get to ride on them for the first time, and we can't wait for them to notice the difference. And then we'll start building the southbound tracks between Lawrence and Bryn Mawr, and also building the 4 new station houses.
And building those station houses, building the southbound tracks, what's the timeline like to wrap all that up?
Those stations will take probably close to 2 years to complete, so we're still on time to deliver this project in 2025.
And then in terms of the additional work looking further north on the tracks, what can we expect from that?
Yeah, so we are a multi-phase project. We're in phase 1 that we've been talking about. We're probably at least a couple of more phases. That includes building from Thorndale all the way north to Linden and Wilmette. Yeah, it's a pretty big project.
Stretch.
And the other stretch of the project that we need to rebuild is around Sheridan Station. That's an old station that has a lot of issues that we want to rebuild and make that accessible as well. So there's lots more work to come.
And those new northbound tracks Chase mentioned that are just about to go into service later this year, they're higher than most L tracks around the city. They've also got noise walls on either side for the first time. That'll cut down on a lot of the iconic CTA clatter that most of us are very used to, but don't worry, we'll still hear the trains going by. It's the sound of Chicago. That's all for us here in Edgewater. Paris, back to you.
There is no silencing CTA trains. Nick, thanks very much. Our digital series WTTW News Explains has taken on everything from why you can't buy a car on Sunday to the details of lake effect snow. But we haven't tackled the toilet until now. So call the neighbors and gather the kids as WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley braves the depths of our sewer system.
Every time you flush, the waste disappears in a swirly whirl, never to be seen again. It's magic. Actually, it's science and engineering. Let's follow that flush. First stop, the sewer pipe. This is where your business mingles with all the other household wastewater. You know, the scummy stuff that gets rinsed off your dishes and clothes and body. In older cities like Chicago, stormwater and runoff joins the party too. That's because Chicago has what's called a combined sewer system. All this waste gets swept into an even lower and bigger pipe owned by the MWRD, or the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. That's the agency that reclaims and cleans wastewater, more than 1 billion gallons every day in the Chicago metro area. Where were we? Oh yeah, the number 2s are riding the waves in the MWRD pipe. Best case scenario, this caca cocktail is headed straight for a water reclamation plant. Worst case, major rainfall and flood overwhelm the sewer system, including the even bigger deep tunnel pipes. And some of these untreated presents flow into waterways like the Chicago River. That's right, back in the gross old days, this is where all the toilet treasures went, straight into the river. And before that, Chicago's sewage dumped into Lake Michigan, aka our drinking water. But let's stay focused on the positive. Today, when wastewater reaches water reclamation plants, large screens filter out big debris. The water then sits in tanks where solids settle to the bottom and are funneled away. If a Throne offering somehow stays afloat, there are, and there's no better way to say this, poop-eating microbes hanging out in the tank. Once our microbes have done their duty, the water is sent to a final settling tank, the heavy microbes drop to the bottom, and the clean water on top flows into the waterways. But not Lake Michigan. Repeat, not Lake Michigan. The whole process only takes about 12 hours. And that's the story from flush to finish.
Now you know. And you can see all of our WTTW News Explained series on our website, WTTW.com/news. And that is our show for this Thursday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. And then at 7 o'clock for the Week in Review, which is live, of course. And then at 10 for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Have a wonderful evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.